A guy called Gerald is, in fact, the stage name of a guy who happens to be called Gerald, Gerald Simpson, in fact. He's an English producer and musician from Manchester. He was an early member of the group 808 State before going solo, and he's credited with being a pioneer of jungle and drum and bass. He has released 11 albums. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of the album Black Secret Technology by a guy called Gerald. It was released in 1995 and was probably his fifth album. Some of the details are a bit difficult to actually completely nail down. Excuse me, it's my first time listening to him. So apparently, this is his shift into jungle, um, in which he was a pioneer. So let's try and do some description of this. There's fast and complex drum patterns. There's very deep and quite weirdly syncopated synth bass going on here. And then there's synthy bits and sometimes repetitive riffs in between. And there's some singing and vocal snatches, sometimes sampled, occasional bits of speech, some bits of sound effects put in there. So it's basically electronica, but the 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 rhythmic stuff is complex and sped up, and the bass stuff is done. It's kind of brought down so that it's very deep here. And the focus here is on this uber busy percussion and this deep bass, and it gives a very relentless feel to it. The interesting thing, or one of the interesting things I found about the deep bass stuff, is that actually, so the way I listen is I listen on various different bits of equipment. And I usually do, here goes process again. I usually do a listen and then a read up on stuff and then another listen. Okay. So that means I get a blind, if you like, listen, or as blind as I can, depending on the context. And then I get an informed listen. But another thing that I do is that I try to make sure that I listen on, one of those listens is on good equipment that's got a good range and a broad sound to it. And there are two things that I use. I've got a really good pair of headphones, and I have got the sound system in the car is pretty good as well. And then the other listen, I try to contrast that with a listen where I'm listening on less high-end equipment. So that's often my laptop speakers, or I've got a little Bluetooth speaker, or various other things that I could do. Why am I talking about this? Because the bass on this album is so deep that when you listen on some other equipment, on the less high-end equipment or the less responsive and the bottom end particular equipment, that bass is completely lost, or it was for me. Um, Back to the album. Apparently, it was influential, and I respect that. The production is clean. It keeps moving on. But I have to say, I'm afraid this album irritated me quite a bit. It's actually quite rare for me to give an album a score below five. So five for me is neutral in terms of I don't really think that there's anything good or anything bad about it. It completely has that midline score. Below five means that I really would rather not listen to it. There's some things about it. Sometimes that is tempered, or quite often that's tempered with stuff that is. There are qualities to it that I like, even though there's some irritations. In this, there wasn't enough of that, and it did pull it down below five. Let me try and talk about what the things are that I think are irritating me here. And I stress think, because I think sometimes when people complain about something, the complaints that they give aren't actually the things that they don't like. And so I'm trying to be as genuine as I can here and work out what it is that I don't like. Okay. And there are several things here. So the first of is the fast, complex rhythms, which are technical and relentless, but they're not grooves that I can feel. And I think that on its own, it wouldn't be too bad. The bass itself, I found annoying. It was off kilter. It's this thick synth bass, very syncopated, huge repetition. Um, but so I actually preferred this album on the cheap speakers. Um, some of the chords are annoying, and I don't really know how. I think they're kind of they're extended jazz chords, but there's um, bits of discord within the chords, and there's some bits of detune, which is this effect that's often used to kind of make a thing sound like it's out of tune with itself. Um, the chords feel a bit, to me, random and unfinished. And then I think the thing that probably really irritated me most of it is that some of the kind of riff lines that are done and they're repeated over and over again are like, I'm going to explain this, but they're like pigeon calls. Now, pigeons irritate me, and because of their call, so I believe that so maybe their calls can be different in different locations around, but around here their call goes da 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 da, and it's that last bit that kind of gives it like it's like a but, and it's an unfinished thing, and it just keeps doing this unfinished thing, and so that between back to this album between these lines and some of the chords, it's constantly got this unfinished feel to it musically. So I don't know if this is just me coming across as grumpy about this album. I really did give it a go. I listened, a couple of times and other little bits whilst I was writing the notes as well. And I'm going to emphasize, I'm trying to make sure I'm not saying I think it's bad. I'm trying to say I found it irritating, a bit like mild toothache. Other people won't, because those things that irritate me here are actually fairly personal things. So it didn't go down well with me, but it might go down very well with you. So it did irritate me enough for me to give that sub 5 mark, which means that the irritations outweigh any of the good things that I had in here. And there is, there's some interesting stuff going on. It's a different sound. It's a new sound. Well, at the time, where were we? 1995. So this was the emergence of stuff like this. Um, but yeah, I'm not a fan. Not for me, but it might be for you. So that's what I think. And as always, I'd love to know what you think about this album. Maybe you completely disagree with me, and I'd love to hear from you if that was the case. Maybe you agree with me, or maybe you've got different irritations with this, or maybe the whatever it is that you think about this album. Please share with me by leaving me a comment. But that's it from me for now.